sometimes, and it never fails, that there are a number of people who say, it happened to me. And so sometimes we expect it to happen, sometimes not necessarily. And so there's a picture of Pandora, and Pandora is getting ready to open that box, and she's getting ready to unleash all of this information out there that some of you may not want to. Some people don't even, they're suspicious. They, you know, different people have different approaches to this, and some people say, I don't even want to know, I don't even want to think about it. But I think most of you are here today because you're curious, and you're the kind of people who really want to know what really happened. And so, because DNA is sort of the scientific answer to the correctness of our genealogy information, this is something that may be very helpful. This is just a symbol that says we're today in the DNA world. Specifically, the topics that we're going to get into, the genetic genealogists like to call this the non-paternity event, the NPE problem, which is sort of a nice little euphemism that it's an NPE. And so, and there's a lot of NPEs out there in the world. So that's the problem, and sometimes it's a problem for us because our family tree is hurting because we don't have this particular information. Well, in order that I can give you this nice case study, I have to give you a little bit of background to be sure that we're kind of all on the same page of talking about the different DNA principles. Certain basic principles that will show how we go about it, how it is done here in this case study, and how you will do it. And so to do that, we will have to talk about some of the ancestry DNA features that will help with this problem, and then we'll get into the case study of the day. All right, the non-paternity problem, this is when you come up with a genetic parent that you didn't know about. Or maybe you knew there was one, but you didn't quite know who it was, but now you're kind of interested. Maybe there's an adoption in the family, and so maybe you are certainly expecting that there should be an event that will help you to identify, you know, who's the father, who's the mother, and so on. The third item here is that this is where it becomes such a common thing. If you stop and think, I've got so many ancestors. If I go out there 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 generations, I've got, you know, hundreds of genetic ancestors, direct ancestors. And I think the law of averages is that you've got to figure once in a while, once every few generations at least, somebody kind of slips up and there is an NPE. And so it might turn out that you're doing your DNA and you're just sort of buzzing along and everything's happy because you've got a wonderful paper tree that you've developed, and then you find it just isn't that way but it should be, because the DNA should match your paper tree. If it doesn't, maybe there's this kind of a problem. And indeed, that was a problem for the Jefferson family. If you think back, maybe it was, I think I might have marked it down here, yes, 20 years ago. This is when this hit the front page, the magazines, the media. Everybody was kind of interested because here was this one branch of the family who said, we think we too are Jefferson family people. And some of the old Jefferson family people said, oh no, not a chance. But they did the DNA tests, and there they were. They're all related. And so this provided what I'm calling an interest bump for genealogy, because now a lot of people who, you know, they're not particularly interested in too much genealogy, but golly, if this thing happened in the Jefferson family, it could happen to anyone. I mean, that means you have unknown, unsuspected ancestors, and you say, golly, these people maybe are also my second or third cousins, or whatever it may be. So the genealogist thought about how, well, if it works there, how can we do it? And it's now taken a few years to get enough tools going that, but we've got the tools. And so if you go to these different genealogy TV shows, you see that they're making a lot of this. And one of, another interest bump kind of thing, this is just 5 or 6 years ago now, when we get the case of the English king. And when you're the king, people really keep track of your descendants. And so a lot of people thought they were the descendants of the king. But this also meant that it was kind of relatively easy to do the DNA, because now we've got a lot of modern day people who absolutely swear that they are descendants of the king and that they should have the right DNA. Well, they dug up the bones. You've heard the story. It made the newspapers and the magazines. They did the testing, and they confirmed, yes, this is the body, the bones of the king. Well, now the question is, who are his descendants? And are all of these people bona fide descendants? And so here a lot of people got tested, apparently, and they had at that time the Y test, which is the male father to father to father to father, etc. test, the similar test for the mother's line. The Y test did not show, look at that, did not show a connection. That means somewhere along the line there was an NPE. We are absolutely more accurate with female lines, because when the mother's there, it is pretty certain who the mother is. And so we don't make as many mistakes. And in fact, in this particular case, it was this mother to mother to mother descendancy that clarified the fact of who the king was, and that yes, he was the king, and yes, some of these people are related, some of the others were not related. The modern genetic people, the ones who kind of specialize, they take on a lot of clients, they do a lot of DNA testing for people who want to know who their ancestors are, because maybe there's an adoption or something. Or even if there's not, these researchers say that often they find some miscues in the family tree. There are a lot of NPEs out there in the world, and that bottom bullet, it doesn't make any difference which test you're using. This can happen, and the data can show it with any of those tests. Now today, we're going to talk mostly about autosomal tests and how this was brought about in my particular case, for my case study. Autosomal testing was the last one of the three big major test types to be developed. And it was not developed until just a few years ago, but since then, it has really taken the DNA world by storm and has become, certainly, by all odds, by far and away the most popular test. In fact, Ancestry DNA doesn't even give any other test. You just take the autosomal, and they've got 10 million people in their data bank who have taken it. And so, this is one reason why, if you're doing autosomal tests and you say, which company do I go with? Hands down, no question about it, Ancestry DNA is the one. Why? They've got the biggest database. And it's so it's as simple as that. You've got about 10 times more chance of finding a match, the right match. This is a slide that I put together to talk about the differences of the three major kinds of tests. Now, this is one of my German people. He's an ancestor who came to central Illinois. You see that he lived back in the 1800s, so he's a few generations back. And if I had him here today, alive and well, to give him the test, if he had the Y test, that would show data on his father, his father, his father, all these people in his paternal line. That's the Y DNA. If it's the MT, the mitochondrial test, which is the mother to mother to mother, he would get information about his mother, her mother, her mother, her mother, that line. And that's all they would get with the Y test or the mito. In other words, if it is now his grandparent, let's see, here is his, or his, yeah, you get into the grandparents, the great-grandparents, and all these 95% or more of your ancestors are not going to have any information based on your Y test. This is why, because so many of your cousins and all your other connections, they're connected out here somewhere with all of those various and sundry people. And so that's where they all are, and because I presume you're interested in 100% of your ancestors and cousins and relatives, that's why we're looking for the autosomal test that's going to give you all that good information. And not that there is not value sometimes in getting that one line or that other line, just as we found in the Richard III case, or the Jefferson case. But for many of us, because we are interested in mothers as well as fathers and grandparents, this autosomal is the one. So now some basic DNA principles. If you take the test, so let's say you take the Ancestor DNA Family Finder test, you're going to get thousands of matches. This is out of date because I think I put this together last year. And now I'm up to something like 32,000. I mean, things are jumping in the DNA world. I mean, it is, if you do something today, 6 months from now I'll have it for 40,000 or something like that. I'm just average. And the reason is because you saw that many of my ancestors come from Germany. They came to America in about the mid-1800s. And so I'm not going to find, because the DNA tests are sold in the USA, mostly only in the USA, I'm not going to find a lot of my German connections there. So that's why I only have 32,000. I know people who have 60 or 80,000 matches. And so it varies. Now see, if you're a more recent person, that your people came to America, you might have fewer than that, but you might have more. In any case, you've got an awful lot of them. Do not worry. You don't care about a lot of those. Out of the 32,000, the 31,000 lower scores, I don't care about. I'm only going to focus on my top scores. That is enough. That will give me what I need to know. And furthermore, even looking at 100 or 300 scores is going to be enough to keep you busy for a while. But that's where you're going to spend your time, and you don't worry about all those others. And so that's why I'm making the point of hit hard on your top, say your top 100 scores. They will do you the most good. And the way you do that, you start by identifying a few matches that you know, you build from there, and pretty soon you're going to have a lot of people identified. Now, here's what you get. You know this. You know that you get 50% from each parent, 25% from each of your 4 grandparents, and so on as it goes out. But not quite. Because of the world of reshuffling, actually you get a little more from maybe one of those grandparents than the 25%, or a little less. And so that becomes, later it will turn out that's kind of an important thing. Here's some definitions. You've got to learn what the scores mean. And so this is kind of what they mean. You get a score like about 800, and you say, hey, that's probably my first cousin. If you get a score of about 400, well, maybe that's the first cousin's daughter. And so you can figure this out, and then you figure out who are the second cousins. And of course, because you're working with your top scores, your highest scores, most of these, after a while, you don't even care too much about. So, but we'll take a look, because back here, see, that shows that a 4th cousin on average gets 13. Divide by 2, and now you're a 4th cousin once removed. To go to a 5th cousin, divide again, and on average, a 5th cousin only scores about 3.5. The cutoff is 6, so you don't get any 5th cousins, right? Well, not quite. Because of the world of reshuffling, you're going to get a few people, and we like those people, who score more than they should. You also get some people who sort of tend to score a little less than they should. But those things are just useful to know. So, but now back to the averages, because we're kind of interested in averages and average scores and about an average number of people. So what proportion of the scores should fall in the different sectors of your family tree? Let me show you a fan chart or something, and you'll kind of know that theoretically, if you get 100 people out there that you look at their scores, you figure about 50 of those should have come from my mother's side, 50 from the father's side. But maybe not quite, because down here, the butt. Some families are much larger than others. Now, back in the 1800s, a lot of those big American families were very large, and if you were kind of typical, you probably came from descendants of some of those large families, so you've got a lot of relatives. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you came from a smaller family, and if there's a smaller group of people, then the pool is not as large. Now then, like in my case, because my people came late, 1850, to America, I'm not going to get as many connections on my father's side of the house. So you factor that information in. But this is the theoretical that says, all things being equal, this is the average. Here's my mother's side, that's this group. I'm not showing my dad's side, but he too should get 50%. But we know he won't get 50% because all those people are over there in Germany and they didn't take the DNA test. Among my mother's people here, her father, her mother, each side of the house should get their fair representation. And then you go to the next level. Well, by the time you're out here, let's see, this is just 1, 2, 3 generations. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 4 on my father's side. Each one of those should get 1/8. Or in this case, if I'm only looking at my mother's people, 1/4 of them. And then here, each piece gets 1/8. That should be, you know, that's easy to understand, right? All right, now we're going to go back and say, how do you build your tree? First of all, there's the people you might know. You plug them in. And then there's some good people who have posted their tree. And so we like that because now we see, hey, this person got a good score. How am I related? Golly, this is my first cousin's daughter, and I didn't even know her. But that it clarifies because she put down exactly where she is in the tree. So these people with the posted trees, that's good. And then because we know from their score about where they should fit, and then if their tree says, yeah, this is about where a first cousin should have fit, or a first cousin once removed, or a second cousin. And so you plug all those people into your tree, or maybe they're already in your tree and you're just confirming the fact that yes, they got a good DNA score. Shared matches is the one that's really going to be the Rosetta Stone for DNA. That is the thing that's going to tell you more than anything else. There are other things that will help. The surname selection option will help. Ancestry DNA will help you because they will give you some ancestor hints, the green leaf people. They will also show you some DNA circles. They are doing part of the work for you. You plug in all of those people too. So before long, you've got a number of people. And then, of course, you can contact people and you can say, hey, look at my tree that I've posted. Where do you fit on that tree? You know, sometimes people are not responsive because we get a lot of junk mail. And so you've got to somehow make your message interesting enough that they're going to respond to you. But when they do, this will be very helpful. So now we're up to today's study, which is going to be based on my mother's side of the family. I've got a lot more people there, a lot more matches, and I'm going to show you how we place different groups in different parts of the thing, and also how I ran across this non-paternity event. So here is my mother's paper trail tree that we're going to talk about. I'll show it to you in just a moment. And because she's an early American, all these people have been here, you know, since the 1600s. So, you know, they've been here 10, 11, 12 generations. And so, and then over the years, I've worked on the paper trail tree. And so I've done a fairly good, a good amount of work with a fair amount of success. But not always, because in places in the USA, before long you can run out of gas very quickly. I've got a lot of people that are lost in the hills of West Virginia or Tennessee or Western, or you name it. And I think that I'm not alone. There's 1, 2, 3 those arrived and more generations. Sometimes you're in trouble. Some others, I go maybe 1, 2, 3.5, and I got nothing beyond Alexander and nothing beyond, and I only have their names. I mean, I'm in trouble sometimes in the 4th generation, and sometimes, well, it's a mixed bag. That's what it is, and so, and that's what I think most of us have to deal with, something like that. But I'm interested in trying to place my people, the number that I can find, who are descendants of my great-grandfather Harmon Tracy, or anybody else on this list. So I'm building my tree. Some of them I know, some of them have posted their tree, and then I start looking at shared matches. I also look at the people's emails. So, looking at my top 100 matches, I've done a fair amount of good work. Now, to make this, I think, a proper presentation, I did not want to phony it up so that I'd say, this is what I could have done, because I could have done it even better, because now I've got 32,000 matches instead of 16. And so I've frozen the presentation just the way that I did it. And so that's why I will tell you that my results today would not change. In fact, they would reinforce and make it even easier that it could have been done. But I'm showing you the way it was, say, a year and a half ago. So, building at that time my top 100 matches, I did not do, I'll show you what I did, but I know a young woman who built this kind of a cardboard display, and it is very large, and it is a fan chart, and so she puts little yellow stickies all over it, like this is my number 3 match, this is my number 6 match, and so on, so that now she's getting a handle on the whole thing of where her matches are. Now certainly there will be some matches that you can't identify, but the idea is you put a number on them. So let's say that these would have been my yellow stickies. I go out to Harmon Tracy and his good wife Anna Rebecca, and I find that many of my top matches are also descendants of those 2 people. My number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and several more. And apparently I'm getting a lot of DNA myself, and so are those people, and I place all of those people. I know who they are. They've either posted their tree, I know, or I already knew who they were, or they told me who they were. I've got some down here, some of these I locked them off, but they're on my dad's side. And then here's a lot of them who descended at the, let's see, what level is that? Here's first cousin, second cousin. These would be third cousins of mine who also descend from Elijah Elifritz. See, I found several people like that. Number 19, 25, 6. See, those are a little bit lower scorers. You get that? The higher scorers are more your second cousins. Now, when you move into a little bit lower scorers, now you're into third cousins and some people like that. I've got a few people that I couldn't quite figure out exactly where they go, so there were a few of them. Now the happy news is that by today, because I've continued to work on it, within my top 100, I have placed 99 of my 100 people so that I know where they are, and that means you can do that too. You just have to just work at it a little bit, but I tell you, I'm kind of lazy, and you can bet I didn't work all that hard or long on it. Yes. So, say it loud.
In my case, I've done this, not in the concentric thing, but what I've found a lot of times is that I can tell which of my 4, let's say, great-grandparents, they are just by the shared matches that I have with them. I kind of know what direction, but I wouldn't be able to put them as carefully as you've done, because I just know, I don't know how far back, and then it descends from them. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I understand perfectly.
And they don't respond to my question, and they don't have their own tree on there. That's the majority of them. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Now here's what I did. I've got some people here that I know either because of their tree or because I'm able to really put it together, that these are indeed third cousins. They all absolutely came from Elijah. I've got, and I didn't show them on the chart, in fact, they're probably not among the top 100, but I've got some people that I know because they share with a big bunch of these people. I know that those people share, they're Elifritzes too, but I don't know for sure whether they came from Elijah or from someplace out
That's what
a
I'm
little
saying.
further.
Or they might be from Clark. You know, I don't,
That's right. But that doesn't bother me, because I know they're only really dealing with they're matching only other Ellifritz people, or maybe some sign. They're not matching the Bruces or the Hoovers or the Henry Tracys. See, so that's why I'm able to distinguish between this gang and that gang and all these different gangs. So that's what I'm doing. Now, I'm going to come to the most important part, the most useful part perhaps of the day, which is there are a lot of people, 50% of them, who do not post any tree. They don't respond to your inquiries, and you throw up your hands and you say, oh, those bad people, and you say, you know, that's bad, but how can I do any good with them? Not to worry. I don't even care if people don't respond. I don't care if half the people didn't post their trees, and I'll tell you why. Because all I have to do is look at who they have shared matches with. Here's the thing, let me go back one. Let me take number 192567. Let's say a new person pops up. He matches number 1925, 6, and 7. Where does he fit on the chart? There's no doubt about it. He only matches Ellifritz people, so he's an Ellifritz. Now, at this point, maybe I don't know if he descends directly from Elijah or he's out there a little bit further. He didn't post his tree, so I can't be sure, but he's got enough shared matches that I know where he goes. And that's why the world of shared matches is something that's going to, this is what makes it for you. And that's why this is the most useful tool in all of DNA. So at that point, I began adding in people. Now, I'm starting off with sort of a semi-conservative approach. See, I just started with the ones that I knew they had posted trees, or I knew about them, or they responded. But now I get some shared match people, and I start adding them in one by one. And this is where I add in a great big bunch more people. And so now I grouped each of those people.
I need to change.
Do I take a time out,
Yeah.
Beth?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have to?
Okay, let's go.
We're good,
Yeah.
Beth? All right, we're back in business. And so this is where we're saying we can put people into one of those groups. And like the people in that Ellifritz group, they're going to match other Ellifritzes, but they're not going to match somebody, and they're certainly not going to match anybody way down here on my dad's side. And that's really the way it works out in fact as well as in theory. And so we begin to make cluster groups of these people. And so like here's some of my cluster group. This is my great-grandfather, Harmon Tracy. These are the people. I've got a big bunch of them. He had a very big family. He had 3 different wives and about 12 or 14 children, and they had children. And anyway, I've got a lot of people, and a lot of them apparently took the DNA test, and I can place all those people. I know where they are. There's some others that they're in the Tracy group somewhere out there. Maybe they're further, maybe they get lower scores, but they match some of these people, and so I know that that's where they go. Now here's my Elijah group. I've got a dozen or so there. And then there's some others that I'm not quite sure where they go, but they certainly go in the Ellifritz, the Ellifritz camp. So I began plugging all these people in. Now I've got the Harmon descendants and some that go further back. And then I've got the Elifrits and the ones further back. And now I'm going to work on some of those other groups. And, oh, by the way, over on the Baker side, my dad's side of the house, I got some people there, so I know who they are. And here was another family, the Symes group, and over here's the Bruce group. And then I've got a group that I'm putting 3 stars there because that's a group I'm going to talk about. This is a group that I ran across where they all seem to have shared matches with one another. Some of them have posted their trees, but I don't recognize any of the names in their tree. And so this is beginning to give me a brain hurt somehow. And so let me show you now where we're at. You know, we had the Harmon people and other Tracys. We've got Elijah, and there's the Symes people, and there's some Bruce people. But now I've got an unknown group, and there's about 40 of them. And they're just stacking up, and some of them, like I say, they posted their trees. Who are these people? And then in the meantime, I'm looking for, I have found the Symes, the Elifrits, I've found different ones. I have not found this Pettis group. I don't find them, and I don't know why. So let me ask or tell you what I may know or what I don't know about Sam Pettis. Here's his time period. He's back there in the mid-1800s, and he's in various records. He's born in Ohio. He lived in the Midwest. He got married. I have a marriage license for him. Mound City is that lowest county, Alexander County in Illinois. It's right down there by the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. He worked in the ship business. He worked there in Cincinnati and St. Louis, and then he got the American dream and bought his own farm in Chauvoneer, Illinois. And I have some records there that show property purchases and census data and things like that. Now, going back in time, Samuel's father, I have less data on him, but I've got some data for him, either in the census or something, and via his one son, Simeon. Simeon says my father was born in Vermont, so I can look for him back there, but I'm not finding much. Well, I do find him in Indiana and Ohio as a grown person, so this is what I would have. There's my mother. Her name is Hallie because she's born in the year 1910, which is the year of you-know-what. They told her she had fallen off the comet, and that's why she got that name. And then her mother, who is going to play big in the analysis, and then here is Sam Pettis. His father's name also Sam, and I don't know who that could be. All right, here's the problem of my matching data. I've got at this time 16,000 matches, and I'm not getting any matches for those Pettises, and yet they should not be that far back there. And so I look for the brother, and he matches with Simeon or Sam, I don't care, make it one of those Pettises. Somebody from Vermont named Pettis. No, nothing, nobody like that. And so I play the surname option game, which you can do on Ancestry. Tell me about every Pettis or however it's spelled. And so they do, and they've got some people with that name. But as I look at them, I can see they're not really matching in the right place. It's just sort of happenstance that they had that name. But I'm trying this, I try other surnames, I tried a different spelling. Now this is work with all these other families. You know, I put in the name of the family and bingo, you know, there I find some people who are matches. Didn't work with the Pettis family. Now, on paper, I knew the name, the first name of the wife, but that's all I knew. And so that was kind of a dead end. So here was the family. Here is Sam Pettis. There's his wife, Lizzie, and the 4 children. Maddie is the third one, born 1870. And so there they are living in Illinois way back when. I now think of a family story that I heard many years ago, many years ago, from the time I'm small, where, I would ask about my grandmother and her family and where she came from. Well, the story was that the mother, Lizzie, had been, quote, direct quote, cast out of the family for playing around. And this is back in the did people do that in the 1870s? Apparently they might have. At least it was worth considering. But here was the story, this was a definite family story, and it happened that 4 children Sam just took the children over to the brother's house and said, this is where you're going to live. And then a few years later, he died. And then Lizzie, I have more information about her, that she remarried and had more children, etc. Well, because I couldn't find any of these Pettis people, I've got to think maybe, just maybe, there's a non-paternity event. And then besides, remember, I've got this group out there. Some of them are getting good scores, but they're not matching anybody else. They ought to go somewhere in the family tree. So I'm thinking now about that possibility. So this group, I'm going to call it the Nan group, because Nan gets the highest score of anybody in that group. She had, well, let's see, what's it say? It says that I identified 55. These are people who got a score higher than 20. And Ancestry DNA says they're at least 4th cousins. And at that time, this is when a year and a half or so ago, I only had about 375. I've got about 1,000 now. And so this is how fast things are jumping. Well, but with 55 people, they've just got to go somewhere, and especially because they match one another, they match me. They've got good scores. Where can they go? So I'm going to look at that group very carefully. I'm going to take a really hard look, say, at the top scores, the top 10. Each one of them has a score of over 30. And remember, that's a really good score. Ancestry says anybody like that, that's considered extremely high. In fact, if you just find one person, they say, that's a 95% chance. I mean, it's just practically a for sure. If you get 10 of them, I mean, and they all kind of match one another, there's just no doubt about it. These are kinfolk, but where do they go? Just to remind you of the scores, if you get a score of over 30, it's that good. I mean, so that's what we're looking at. Here are the top 10 scores going across the top. Here's Nan and her various people. And so of those people, Nan gets really a good score, 67. See, Nan, look at that. That's virtually 100% that Nan is a relative. According to the other chart, she would be about a 3rd cousin. That's what a 3rd cousin scores. I think they said on average 57. So she's even a little better than average for a 3rd cousin. But there's Nan, and there's Vern and Sarah and the rest of them. Now look, every one of those 10 people scores at least 30. Of those 10 people, Nan has a chance maybe to have shared matches. some of them. She shares with Vern, with Ronnie, with 4 of these people. In fact, see, you can see what's happening. They're all kind of matching one another. And it gets better. So what does this mean? Well, it means certainly this cluster of people should have a location in the family tree because they're all scoring so that individually we're virtually sure they're a match. And now there's a whole bunch of them that are matches to one another. So now let's look further at how many shared matches these 10 people have. And in fact, this time I'm going to go more than 10. I'm going to count down the list. And here's not only Dan and Vern and the rest of them down to the top 10, but here's another 10 or 12 or 15 going down. Well, in fact, that first 15 or so, we're down to 30, 29. But here is the important thing. Nan shares with 19 different people. Most of these people, and maybe a few others that I didn't put on the chart. Here's a bunch of others. Here's 22. Look at all those people who are matching other people. And the important, really important thing is that it is what I'm calling, my word, a closed pool. That means these people are matching only capital letters, all caps, underlined. Only people in their good Nan group. They're not matching the Bruces or the Hoovers or the Bakers or none of the other groups. They're only matching people in that other funny little group that I don't even know who they are. And there's so many of them, they've got to fit somewhere. Well, you can see, that's what they're doing. They're only matching people. Now, I didn't tell you quite the truth, because there are three people out of that total group of however many, 55 or so people, who were outside the pool. How could they be matches with people outside their pool, when, like 99% of their matches are other Nan people? Well, I'll tell you about these 3 people. Nan herself matched 2 people outside her own group. And here's the Sheila, Dolly, some of them. There were only 1, 2, 3 of them who matched others. Now here is the thing. I know those 3 people. I know who they are and where they are. And here they are. Here's Anna. This is my known first cousin, John Tracy's daughter. That's his other daughter. This is my cousin Jane's granddaughter. And so they're first cousins once, that's a first cousin twice removed. They all descend from my grandparents, and they are the only 3 matches in my whole list who were in that spot on the chart. Now, let me ask you, you can see this is not rocket science. Who can Anne have matches with? Can she have a match with somebody on the Baker side? No, because she's getting nothing from them, no DNA. But she could get matches from the Tracys, the Greers, she can get any of them because she can get any that her parents have. Or in this case, it would be her grandparents. In other words, Anna is a universal donor or recipient, maybe I should say, because she can play with anybody, which explains why she can play with Nan, because she can match anybody on the Tracy side of the house. And so that's why I'm calling those three people universal donors on the Tracy side. They could be related to any group on the tree, but if somebody descended from an Ellifritz or a Bruce or somebody, they're different. They can only have something to do with people in their own group. So now, I think we're really honing in on the Pettis group, and it might be that there is a different genetic father here. So let's look at where we are. We have searched for Pettis people, and we didn't find them. In the meantime, we have identified. This number by now is up to like 200 or something. This is huge. We have a lot of people who have shared matches with one another, and they're a cluster, and it's a closed pool cluster. This kind of makes it almost so that it's really easy to look at now. Now maybe, this is a theory, maybe they could be substitutes for the Pettis. So let's go back to the paper records, because we always like to make the point that DNA and the paper records play together. They should play together. So at this point, we're going back to the old-fashioned genealogy, and we want to show the possibility, just the possibility, of a candidate genetic father who would have been in Chauvigny, Illinois in 1870. All right, here we go back to the census. Mattie, my grandmother, was 1 month old in that census. And the census showed her parents, showed the location. Anybody ever heard of Chauvigny, Illinois? No. I don't think I've ever had it happen. But I'll tell you about it, because here it is. I have been to Chauvigny. I one time had a job, a short-term job in St. Louis. It's about 100 miles over there. And so I said, I wonder who's in Chauvigny. Well, there's not much of anybody in Chauvigny. It's a small place, 839 people, according to the census. I don't think I even found a gas station it's a rural sort of a decentralized community or something like that. It never got large. This is it. This is Chauvigny. So, however, in a way, I think that's good, because if I'm looking for an ancestor in Chicago, that's a different story. And so actually I like it that they're in Chauvigny and that that's where it was. And so maybe, just maybe, somebody in that unknown Nan group, maybe they've posted a family tree that says, I've got an ancestor in Chauvigny. And maybe we can look at the 1870 census and find some families in Chauvigny that are suspects. This is a cold case. So now we're focusing in on Chauvigny, Illinois. Ancestry does have a marvelous option. It's a geographic option where you just put in the name of the town. And if somebody posted data, and within their tree or wherever they said it, there is Chauvigny. And so that's what I did. And here's the spoiler. I got one hit. Now, guess who? Here is, I'm putting in Chauvigny in Fayette County. Here is my one person. And they say, well, that's maybe a fourth cousin. And I'm saying, wow. All right. I got a good hit. Now, at this time, I had, however many, 18, 16,000 matches. Nan, the highest scoring person in that unknown group, pops up as the one and only person who had an entry that included Chauvigny. If I had had space, I would have put 100 stars there. I cannot make this stuff up. You could not write fiction. People would not believe it. They'd say, you know, if you put it on television, they, oh no, you know, that's obviously, you got to buy in. I mean, but there it was. You can't hope for anything better than that. On my first try, it's maybe beginner's luck or something, but I find the one that I want. Here is Nan's tree. Good soul that she is. She posted her tree. She also responded to an email. And her tree says, here is my mother, born where? In Chauvenir. There's the grandmother. There's a great-grandfather born way back in the family was there in 1858. Remember, 1870 is the target year. And here is a great-great-grandfather. He was living, well, we'll have to check that family out. So, we go to the 1870 census. This is easy to do. I'd already found Sam Pettis and his family in that census. And his brother Simeon was there. They were both in Chauvenir. Not too many people though in Chauvenir, but now I'm going to see if Stephen Decatur Perry was there. So I put that in here. Stephen Decatur Perry, 1870 census, lived in Chauvenir. Is he going to be there? Yeah, yes, there he is. Perry Decatur. He's going by his patriotic middle name. He's 56 years old in 1870. He has a family. He has a wife. He has a boy. No, that's a girl. So he's got this boy, 22 years. He's got two younger boys, but he's got that boy, 22 years old. And so this is what we found. He's only a page or so away in the census, and there's not that many people living in Chauvenir. So in other words, the Perry and the Pettis families live near one another, and it's a small community, just a few hundred people. Stephen Perry was 56 at the time, but that son Ferd was 22, and he was single. And so my first shot out of the box is I say, Ferd is, I suppose that's short for Ferdinand. Ferd is my candidate. And so this also, the census, showed there were a couple of grown sons in the neighborhood. So, of course, one of those could be a candidate as well. So Ferd was not the only one who could have qualified. But here is what the tree would look like if I put Ferd in it, or if I put one of the brothers. So here I am, and here's Nan. And we're going up kind of similar routes, but we end up 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. That's the third cousin relationship. If we're both descendants of Stephen Decatur Perry. Now, I don't think that I'm related to her man, John, because, see, he's only 12 years old at the time. And besides, her score is more like a third cousin rather than, this would be a second cousin and she would have descended from John. So I think indeed we've got it right that it's one of those boys, but it's not John. It might be Ferd. And I don't think, I'm not going to say anything about the older man. So this is my theory, that here's this young mother. She's only like 20 years old. And who knows, maybe her husband's off working as a ship's carpenter. And it's kind of a lonely time in Chauvenir. And so, and here's this neighbor who's 22 years old. And I think he is the likely person. And so So Nan would be my third cousin. Now this is beginning to look good, but I'm not sure it's really totally good just yet, because if you get one or you get something, you know, you begin to sort of feel like I'm onto something, but you'd like more evidence, would you not? And so, because you say, you know, wait, is there somebody who could really grill you and say, wait a minute, maybe there's something else, some other explanation. And like, you know, they say, you know, maybe you're right, that it was an NPE, but not necessarily Perry. You know, it could, there were a lot of other people living there, and just maybe they're the ones to hook up with. And so maybe somebody else. And so I've got to take care of that possibility. I want more data. And so I start looking a little bit more now about the Perry family. And so I look and see what's posted there, who they are, where they came from. And I'm looking now at possible shared connections with some of those other people that are matches for me and they're matches for Nan. And did they post their tree? And are they all a bunch of shared matches together? So I'm going to look now more at that list, big long list now of shared matches, because Nan had 19, and this number of people in that group keeps growing. So, but I'm going to look first at the higher scoring people. So here's a guy named Ben. He's posted his tree. Got a lot of people in the tree. I take a look at it, and who do I find? There is Stephen Decatur Perry. And there's one of the boys, Daniel. He was one of the teenagers. He was 14, remember, when Ferg was 22. But see, Ben has the kind of score that would now make him whatever he was, a third cousin, once or twice removed. So now there's three of us. And so I'm feeling a little better about it. Would you like more? I'll get you more. Indeed, here is Becky and Sheila and Dolly and Ken. They all trace their tree back to Stephen Decatur Perry. And so here they all are, and they all have pretty good scores. Now Nan has the best one, and here I am, and here's all these other people, Dolly and Sheila, and again, I'll tell you, since then, I could add another half dozen, and like this has gone beyond just a little coincidence. So, where are we now? I've got actually more than 6 who all trace back to that same man, and I think we are beyond any possible coincidence. There is just no doubt, you know, I'm ready to be grilled now because I'm on safe ground. There is no way in the world that this could be other than this family who are my relatives. And so I'm sure that a thorough analysis of more people would get me more people there as well. So, remember, there are other companies, and so we'll take a look just for fun to see does family tree DNA have some. And so I go to family tree and I do the surname selection option. I put in the name Perry, anybody there named Perry, and the first guy that I hit has a score over there of 83, and it turns out he has posted his tree, and his nice tree also has Stephen Decatur Perry. So I found one on family tree DNA, and I think this kind of ratio is about what you get. Like, in other words, if I had relied on, well, I guess I could have maybe found this person on family tree, But Ancestry does it much better and with much more confidence because I've got more like a dozen people there. Here's what has happened. You can see that the genie has come out of the bottle. If I ever wanted to talk to my various relatives about this, some of them will not like to hear that. But I'll tell you, that's what happened. And so, and that's really what I have ended up with now. I now have, I have connected those families. The DNA science works. It's a perfect science. And if you work it, it will work for you. And so here's what I've got. In addition to all these other people that fit in these other groups, I've now got a big bag of people that fit not in the Pettis group. I crossed them out, and that's in now what is the Perry group. And so that's pretty slick. Now, this also means when your tree is now all really kind of messed up, because now you say, well, which tree do I want to use? Like, this is the family that the Pettises were the ones who actually brought up the children, and they seem to be the good souls. So you've got kind of like what was the real family tree, but then you've got your genetic tree. I think somehow the modern tree makers will have to somehow make some adjustments to their trees, because we will have genetic trees, and I'm still kind of not sure what to do with these different kinds of trees. We have come to the end. And so here's what I'm going to draw some conclusions with. First of all, I think it is indeed useful to identify these locations, like in other words, put your stickies on your tree and figure out where they all go, because they're going to cluster. And once you begin getting a cluster, your shared matches will really make it for you. And so between shared matches and the posted trees, surname selections, you're combining what you already had with this new data. And in this particular case study, I'm confident that we solved the problem. One thing we did was, and this is not easy to do, to have non-evidence, because you try over and over, in this case, to find data about people who should have been there, but they weren't. You couldn't find them. And so I found nothing about those Pettises, but I got a lot of high scorers with a cluster in that specialized group, and eventually we just got one piece of evidence after another, and that's what we ended up with. So there you have it, and I will officially conclude, but you can come and ask questions and things for the next 8 minutes.